Namaskar bachcho. Welcome to this virtual class. Students, in the last episode of IED, that is Indian Economic Development, we have started the first chapter, that is the Indian economy on the eve of independence. That means we are studying about the sectors of our economy which we have inherited from the British rulers after the independence, that is on 15th August 1947. So in that episode, we have seen about the agriculture sector, industrial sector and the foreign trade of our economy during the time of the independence, that is at the time of 1947. So moving ahead and continuing this same chapter in this episode, today we will discuss about the demographic profile of our country on the eve of independence, occupational structure of our country during the year of independence, and at last we will see about the infrastructure facilities, that is the social and the economic structure of our economy during the time of independence. So students, in this episode we will study about the demographic profile of a country under the British rulers. So here one by one we will see the points. How was our demographic profile? So first of all, we will see about the birth rate and death rate. So during the time of British rulers in our country, the birth rate and the death rate both are very high. So when we talk about the birth rate, it was nearly 48% per thousand rate. And about the death rate, it was nearly 40 to the per thousand rate. So when we take the total population, in that nearly 40% in that 1000 people used to die near in a country, that is the 40 per thousand, and the birth rate was 48 per thousand. So here, due to the high rate of birth rate and the death rate, it brought a significant backwardness in our economy. So here, the huge amount of population, the huge number of population depend upon the economic structure. So that lead to the backwardness, the economic backwardness in the country during the British rule. Secondly, we see about the infant mortality rate. So what do you mean by infant mortality rate? So that rate refers to the death of infant babies, that means the babies below 1 year. So students, here the infant mortality rate says about the number of death, the number of infant babies death in per thousand. So at the time of British rule, it was nearly, the infant mortality was nearly 218 to per thousand, that is the per thousand newly born babies. But that rate have gradually decreased, and presently we have only 40. That means we are having only 40 numbers of infant babies death in per thousand babies born during 1 year. So that was the infant mortality rate. So by getting the knowledge about the infant mortality rate, you can very easily guess that the facility, the health facility which we had at the time of independence, at the time of British rule, was very low. So due to the malnutrition and even the insufficient diet to the mothers, the infant babies mothers, the death rate have increased at that time. We had a very high infant mortality rate during the time of British rule in our country. But nowadays you know that the infant mortality rate have decreased from 218 at the time of independence to presently we have only 40. So this is possible only because of the government schemes and the health facility which is provided by the government to the common people. And then we see about the life expectancy. In life expectancy, that it says the average life of a person. That means it shows the age of a person who lives in the country. The life expectancy rate shows the average age of that country's people, the people who are living in that country. Now students, at the time of independence, that is at the time of British rulers, that life expectancy rate, that is the average life of a person in our country, it was only up to 32 years. But after that, nowadays when you take the life expectancy of the people at the present time, it was nearly 66 years. That means on an average, a person who is living in India is having a life expectancy of 66 years. That is the average age. Students, you can very easily guess what is the reason behind this. This is only because of the health conditions, the health facilities provided by the government to the people, and even at the time of Britishers, many number of times due to severe famines and due to the epidemic diseases, these life expectancy of the people got reduced. Not only this rate, even the infant mortality rate affected due to the severe famines which occurred in our country during the British rules. Okay students, moving forward in the demographic profile, we will see about the literacy rate. So we'll see what is the literacy rate of a country at the time of independence. So students, here you will be shocked to know the data. Here we had nearly only 16% of our total population under the literacy. That means literacy shows that those person who can read and write. So those person who are able to read and write any of a language in a country, so they may be called as literates. So of the total population, we had only 16% of our total population was literate. And students, you will be surprised that only 7% of females at the time of British rule were literate. So that was the condition of our population, the literacy condition of our population at the time of independence, at the time of British rule of our country. But you know, now due to the facilities given by the government and the educational facility as we have today, by this rate, the literacy rate have increased more than 80% in our country. So students, so this is the literacy rate, the literacy profile of a country at the time of independence. And in the demographic profile, we have the last point where we see about the demographic transitions. So when we talk about the demographic transitions here up to the period of 1921, so here after 1921, we had a large increase, a large growth in our population. So before 1921, the population growth was consistent. The growth of population in the country was very consistent. So students, how we can guess? So before 1921, the population growth which is being counted by the census, so that census showed some sort of increase and decrease at every consecutive census. So these census data before 1921 shows that there is an increase and decrease in every consecutive census. The census taken on 1931, 41, 51, that census shows that there is a gradual increase in the growth rate of our population. So at the time of independence, as I told you, after 1921, we had a gradual increase in the total population, the population rate. So that increased population, the population explosion brought a economical backwardness in our economy. So due to increase in the population rate, we had a backwardness. So economically and socially, we suffered a lot due to the population explosion in our country. Now students, look at this data. The census of 1901 showed a decline of 0.04 crores in total population. That is from 23.87 crore in 1891 to 23.83 crore in 1901. The census of 1911 showed a rise of 1.38 crore from 23.83 in 1921 to 25.21 in 1911. And again, the census of 21 showed a decline of 0.07 crore, that is from 25.21 to in 1911 and to 25.14 in the year 1921. So from the year 1921 onwards, the total population in India never declined. It showed a consistent rise. The census of 1931 recorded a rise of 2.76 crore, and the census of 1941 recorded a rise of 3.96 crore, and the census of 1951 showed a rise of 4.24 crores, and so on. So students, this consistent rise in the population of our country brought a burden over the investment profile. So we had a very low growth in our economic development. So that is only because of the the demographic profile, that is the population explosion during the period of Britishers. And now we will see about the occupational structure of our country on the eve of independence, that is during the period of British rules. So students, here one by one we will look about the occupation structures. So when we talk about the occupational structures, so that is related with the economic activities. That means the earning made by the people with the way of economical activities. Here in the occupational structure, we will study about the distribution of a total population for their earning on different sectors in the economy. That is, we start from the primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. So one by one we will see our population is being distributed among these three sectors for their earnings. So let's start from agriculture. So the total population at the time of independence, it was completely dependent upon the agricultural sector. Students, nearly 72.7% of our total population was dependent upon the agriculture sector. So these 72% of population directly or indirectly depend upon the agriculture or the allied activities of agriculture in the economy. And during the period of Britishers, we had a very low growth of agricultural development in our country. So when we had a very low growth, a very low profile in the agricultural sector, that brought a economical backwardness in our economy. So here we can see that more than 72% of our country is dependent upon agriculture and these allied activities. At that time, the students, the dependence of 72% of population on agriculture shows that the dependency of the people on agriculture sector. And as I told you that in the previous episode, the agriculture sector was not developed as in the other countries' agriculture. When you compare with the countries of America, Canada and Russia, other nearly 4 or 10 or even the 2% of total population was dependent upon the agriculture. But when we compare our country at the time of independence, more than 70% of our population was dependent upon the agriculture sector. Now we'll see about the industrial sector. So students, when we're talking about the industrial sector, even in the previous episode we have seen about the industrial sector, so we had a very low profile. That means what? At the time of independence, the industry, that is the industrial sector, was insignificant source of occupation. The students, it had given only 9% of the occupational source to the people through the industrial sectors. So even we have seen that we had a very low number of, very few number of modern industries which flourished in the country during the period of Britishers. So in that one we have seen about the modern industries like Tata Iron and Steel Industry, TISCO. Then apart from that we had some paper mills, we had some sugar mills and some the textile mills. So these are some modern industries which used to flourish, which are being established during the period of Britishers in our country. And at last we have the tertiary sector. So that tertiary sector nearly had 17% of the total population as their occupational profile in the tertiary sector, that is service sector. But here also most of the service sectors are engaged on the companies established by the Britishers. They are working in the British companies. Though we had a 17% of our total population on the tertiary sector, but it had brought a very less sources of income to the people and making their lives better. So students, so these agriculture, industrial and tertiary, that is the primary, secondary and the tertiary, these sectors showed a unbalanced growth. So when we talk about the occupational structure, we had a unbalanced growth in this sector. That means what? Students, as I told you that nearly 72% of population depend upon only one sector, that is agriculture, and nearly only 9% of people are dependent upon the industrial sector, and the 70% on the tertiary sector. That means what? That unbalanced growth and the unbalanced dependence of the people on the three different sectors showed a unbalanced growth. So that also brought a backwardness in the economy. So students, these are the occupational profile of our country during the time of independence. Students, now look at this table. With the help of this table, you will get the data about the occupational structure of a country during the year 1951. The data is based on the census of 1951. You can see the occupation structure of our country. Students, at last we will see about the infrastructure on the eve of independence. We'll see about the condition and infrastructure facility in our country during the period of British rulers. So when we talk about the infrastructure, it have two elements. That is the economic profile and the social profile. Students, in the economic profile or the economic changes, in that one we will study about the means of transport, communication, banking, power and energy. So students, here we will study about these facility during the time of independence in our country. So in the social changes, in the social profile, we will study about the development of health, the health facility, housing facility and the education. So students, look at the first one, the economic changes, the economic profile of a country, that is in fact economic infrastructure. So here the railway, so in the field of transport, railway has been established. So in the year 1853, the Britishers have established a railway. So the railway, the first railway was started in the year 1853, that is between the Bori Bandar, presently it is known as Bombay, that is Mumbai. So from Mumbai to Thane. So it was laid for the distance of 34 kilometers. So that was the first commercial rail line set up, established between Thane and Mumbai. So students, here you should know, though we had a railway, because nowadays railway is being known as the lifeline of our country. But when the Britishers established the railway lines, they have only used this facility to develop, to expand their colonization in our country, to exploit our resources in our country. So that was the development made in the means of transport by the Britishers in our country. And apart from the communication, in the field of communication, the services like postal services, the telegraph services were started. And in banking, the Britishers have established the Imperial Bank of India. For trading with the merchants, they have established the bank, Imperial Banks. Previously, we had a Presidency banks, and that banks have been merged with the one bank that has been named as Imperial Bank of India, and presently we know this bank as State Bank of India. So that was a very low development, the low economic development brought in the field of the communication, the banking and the transportation. So students, apart from this, we will see about the social changes and the social profile of our country at the time of independence. So in that we will study about the status of health, the education and the housing. So when you talk about the education, as I told you that we have 16% of our population was literate. So with that one, we can very easily guess how was our education facility. So due to the poor education, the poor education facility, the poor education schemes by the government, very less Indians were literate. So that is only 17% of our total population was literate at the time of independence. And with the average age of a person in our country, that is the life expectancy rate and the infant mortality rate, that was very high at the time of independence. So with that one also we can guess that we had a very poor health condition, the poor health facility in our country during the time of independence. So students, that was the infrastructure at the eve of independence in our country. Students, now we will study about the railway. Though the railways was set up by the Britishers, it brought some positive changes in our country. So look at this table. With this we will try to understand the changes made by the railways. So students, here we will study about the impact of railway in India. So first of all, we will look at the positive impact. So first of all, we will see the positive impacts. The railway facilitated expansion of domestic market. Accordingly, export and import of the country showed a significant rise. So here, in the positive impact, we can take the railway, which helped in our export and import transaction in the domestic market by transporting the commodities from one place to another place. Then the railway facilitated the commercialization of agriculture, as goods could then be moved to distant places. This implied a modest change in the outlook of the farmers. They started viewing farming as a business rather than merely a source of subsistence. Then the railway enabled people to break the barriers of distance and undertake journeys to far off place. This promoted cultural affinity among the countrymen. Then in the fourth one, you can see that the faster movement of good grains across different parts of the country owing to the railway helped control the spread of famine. So food supplies could reach the people before they were driven to starvation. So these are the positive impacts of railways which we could see in India. Then apart from that, now we will see about the negative impacts. So the negative impacts, railways contributed to colonial exploitation of Indian economy because the primary goods, that is the raw materials, could then be easily transported from the fields and the farms to the ports for the purpose of exports to the British economy. And finished goods coming as the import to the Indian economy could be easily transported to the interior of the country for purpose of sale. Thus, the spread of railway led to the spread of the domestic markets for Britain products. So students, so these are the positive and the negative impacts of railway in our country during the British rules. So students, at last we will have one question in our mind. Here we need to explain, was any positive impact of British rulers in our country? We are having a question in our mind that due to the British rulers in our country, though they have ruled our country more than 200 years, do you think we had any positive impact? Certainly not. But students, apart from these, we had some side effects, the positive side effects of the British rulers in our country. So let's see that positive effects, the positive impacts of British rulers in our country. So in the positive side effects of the British rulers in our country, the first one is the commercial agriculture. The commercial agriculture, which existed only as the conceptual possibility prior to the British rule, started showing green shoots. It implied a good breakthrough as it started changing the outlook of farmers, and farming gradually became to be accepted as a business rather than merely a means of subsistence. Second one, the spread of railway and roadways. The spread of railways and roadways opened up a new opportunity of economic and social growth. It also implied greater cultural affinity across different parts of the country. Third, expanding means of transport. The expanding means of transport served as a support system to combat the spread of famines. Food supplies could be rushed through the drought hit areas. Then the transition from barter system of exchange to monetary system of exchange. That means there was a significant transition from barter system of exchange to monetary system of exchange. The growth of monetary system of exchange facilitated division of labor, specialization and large-scale production. And at last we had a system of administration. The British Raj in India left a legacy of an efficient system of administration. This served as a ready reckoner for our politicians and planners. So students, so at last we can conclude this chapter as that during the British rulers, during the time of independence, our economy was in the backward condition, the stagnant condition, and it was in the extreme poverty. So that was the condition of our economy during British rulers. So students, that's all for today. I hope you could understand the concepts clearly, and based on this I have given some homework, and I hope you can do this homework very easily. So note down the homework. Okay students, now note down the home assignments. Look at the first question. What is infant mortality rate? Then the second question is, what is the state of primary sectors of Indian economy on the eve of independence? So here you need to explain about the primary sectors. Then in the third question, what do you mean by commercialization of agriculture. Then write few words on infrastructure in the Indian economy at the time of independence. Students, the last question, what is life expectancy? So students, I hope you can do all this question very easily at your home. So note the homework. In case of any doubt, you can contact us. So students, that's all for today. We will meet in the next episode with a new chapter. So until then, keep learning, stay safe, stay alert. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.